What story have you heard lately about AI? There is so much out there. How can we keep it all straight? What is exciting are the great stories about innovations that people create with AI that you can benefit from.
Welcome to Playbook AI Partners Podcast, the show that turns AI from overwhelming into actionable.
Your host, Sandy Kibling, is the chief playmaker, helping business owners and teams stop chasing shiny tools and start using AI in a way that actually moves the numbers, saving time, reducing busy work, and driving growth.
Each episode features industry experts and real-world tactics, providing clear, do this next plays, simple AI workflows, and practical guardrails so you can use AI safely, execute with confidence, and get results.
Let's run the play.
Well, hello everyone, and before we get into the show, I wanted to highlight a few things. Number one, I want to highlight the Signature Playbook Series course. If you're looking to build that foundation, that's not necessarily 20 questions about AI, but really getting into the meat of what AI is, like understanding prompt framework, understanding the chat platforms, talking about the navigator, helping you maintain your AI with authenticity, your brand, your voice, and shaving off 15 to 20 hours a week. That's all about the navigator. Learning how to use AI with some use cases and talking about data security and governance to maintain your trust with your clients. This course is the course for you. It's currently 50% off. I'll drop a link to it. Number two, I want to highlight a free course that's out there. Yes, I said free. This course is all about chat platforms. Whether you're trying to understand Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT, this is a free course that you can take to give you a foundational understanding of those platforms, which may be good for your business. I'll drop a link to that as well. And number three, I want to highlight coaching and community. Guys, I think in the world of AI, having that community is so incredibly important, just to collaborate with other people, share wins, ask questions. But in the community, the huddle, one of the things that I do is I have 2 live sessions a month. I did Perplexity about a week and a half ago. The playback is available if you want to better understand Perplexity, use cases, how to use it, kind of a home tour, if you will, of what it looks like. And again, I'll drop a link to it, but there's a great playback on that. Tomorrow, April 1st, at the time of this recording, I will be talking all about the navigator. Again, helping you understand how you can shave off 15 to 20 hours in a work week and help maintain your brand, your voice. I will be getting into that tomorrow. And if you can't make it, there'll be a playback. I'm also going to talk about in the month of April, I'm going to talk about automations, really kind of getting down to what they are and how they can benefit your business. And I'm going to highlight Suno, which is a creative music platform. So what I like to do in the huddle is to highlight a AI tool, usually 2 times a month. Again, in April, it'll be 3 times because it's a longer month. But that way we can talk about a tool, not listen to 20 tools in 15 minutes, but really get to a tool to really understand it to see if it can benefit you and your business. The huddle is free for the month of April, so feel free to join us. I'd love to have you on and get to know you and share with you this great knowledge. And also there's coaching. If you feel like, hey, I just need someone to walk me through it, make sure and check that out as well. And finally, I wanted to highlight the Winning Edge course, which is all about workflows and automations. We're working on that right now, and that will be available at the end of April. I will keep you posted. So again, make sure to check out the show notes if you're interested in learning more about any of those options. And now on with the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the show, Going from Zero to One in the Age of AI. While a conversation about AI can be positive or negative, I have to say I really enjoy the people I meet and learning how they have transitioned to a new opportunity and creating innovations in AI that people can benefit from. To help us get into this topic, I have Sean Griffith on the show. Sean is a longtime SaaS operator turned founder and the creator of Truffle, an AI-powered interview platform helping small businesses hire faster and smarter. A marathoner and sun chaser, Sean thrives on big challenges, but after years of early morning calls and late night dashboards, he made a bold pivot, leaving corporate life to build his own company and reclaim time with his family. Now, as a founder and dad, Sean is on a mission to help others find a better balance between meaningful work and meaningful moments. He brings practical wisdom, startup scars, and a fresh take on what success really looks like. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thanks so much for having me, Sandy. This is wonderful.
Oh, so excited. You've done a big pivot. So why don't you start off by telling us about what you've done and how it's led you on the journey today and why AI?
For sure. So I'll roll to the way back, I guess, if you will. So if we look back about 10 years ago, I was making another career transition. I started with a company called Simple Texting, very early, right? They were a startup themselves. I was employee number 7 and brought in at that stage. They were starting to see some scale, and I had some skills that were, I think the founder saw could really contribute to the growth of the organization. And that was a pretty incredible journey. So we went from 7 people to about 150 people in the course of a few years. I helped to lead that organization as COO and general manager. And that was really wonderful, right? So, sort of going through the growth of the company. And this was before AI was sort of really a thing. That company was acquired actually twice by 2 other companies. And so it was this really interesting sort of acquisition story. But along that journey, I ended up running product strategy and operations for a publicly traded company, which had offices in Australia and Sweden. And so my teams were spread globally, right? And I had sort of 700 people in the various teams that I had, and was getting to a stage of, a little bit of burnout, right? So you're sort of, calls all of the time and more calls than actually doing work, right? And for me, as sort of an operator, my happy place is doing work, right? Is actually seeing the results, right? Working with the teams. And I was finding that more and more difficult. And at the same time, AI sort of comes on the scene, right? Where, we saw and we started to institute some AI in the companies that we were working with and running. And we saw an opportunity. And the opportunity, we saw was really around this hiring piece for myself and some of my sort of colleagues that I was working with at the time, where, we were a remote company. And so we were getting, 1,000 applications for every role that we posted. And if you can imagine, right, how do you possibly sort through 1,000 applications trying to figure out who's really good? And so we sort of started to talk about some ideas, right? What is there a way to leverage AI in this sort of world go forward to help make some smarter decisions in hiring? And the businesses we had worked with previously were small businesses, right? We had 18,000 small businesses at Simple Texting that we worked with, and we really loved, sort of working with these smaller businesses and saw a real opportunity there. There were some tools that existed, but they were all $30,000 a year, something that a small business just couldn't afford. And so we had some experience, right, in this sort of SaaS space, building products that were affordable, but still, simple enough to use, but really powerful. So that's sort of the where it all began. And AI gave us the leverage or the that we needed to sort of unlock this sorting through candidates. It was no longer just kind of a keyword filter, but you can actually go deeper. And so that's where the AI story began, I guess.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. So you made the decision then to leave corporate, and it sounds like saw the value enough in AI and some other family reasons to say, I'm done with corporate. I'm going out on my own.
Yeah, that's right. I think I've always had this sort of entrepreneurial spirit, right? I was raised in a household where, both of my parents at various times had been entrepreneurs, and it's something that I had always wanted to do. And not to get too ethereal, right? But I think if I think about, sort of a lifetime, right? You only have so much life to give. And for me, it was like the perfect opportunity where I was in my family and in my career to do something and really give sort of my full life force to something, and that thing being Truffle today.
Oh, that's awesome. Before we get into that and your startup scars, because I know you have a few of those, what do you tell people today? Because I still think I have different conversations, and my husband actually works for a global mining company. So I thought of that when you talked about the 700 people and calls at all different times of day, especially if you're dealing with a company. What do you tell people today that are still kind of on the fence about AI? Just, hey, I'm going to sit on the sidelines. This too will pass. Or I hear a lot of hype, but is it real? What made you just kind of say, no, it's time to get out, get away from sitting on the sidelines and jump in? What was kind of that pivotal point for you?
Yeah, I think, look, I totally appreciate it. It's pretty easy to say, it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen to me, or it's not going to happen right now. But I think a good example was that, there was this essay that went around not that that long ago. And for every, most people have seen it, right? And it really talked about the sort of like this moment in AI. This is more recent. Of course, my story is a little bit older, but just anecdotally here, a few days afterwards, I got on the phone with my mom, right? And she's getting a little bit older. And I said, Mom, you've got to go and you've got to, download. It doesn't matter which model you're doing, but you got to go and you got to download it and you got to start using it sort of today, right? And she called me this morning and she runs her own business as well. And she's like, you wouldn't believe, sort of the back and forth that I'm having, right? And the what it's opening up for her, which is really incredible. Which is all to say that I think maybe I just saw it a little earlier. We were very early users, right? At Simple Texting, we did a bit of a hackathon when, sort of GPT APIs first came out. And in a weekend, we built sort of some AI tooling. And that for me was the moment where I said, wow, this is really interesting. And it's only going to get bigger from here. And we've seen that. And we've seen the time compression actually, get smaller and smaller and smaller as these models grow and get more capable. And I think we saw this big leap right in February with some of the newest models being released.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm also an insurance broker. So I know you're in Canada, I'm in the US, but open enrollment period is kind of like a huge, big time of the year for a health insurance broker helping people get healthcare insurance. But I mean, I was like on the sidelines and I'm like, I just, I'm going to dabble, figure this out, all this good stuff. And I was busy. I mean, I really didn't have time to add something to my plate, but I was so blown away by what you can do, by the hours I can save, and really just seeing the view of it. And I've had such a pleasure, even on my healthcare podcast. I've interviewed so many physicians and how they're using it today in healthcare. It's absolutely mind blowing. So I like asking that to always find out what that pivotal point was. And yay for your mom, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's great.
And
Well,
now she's
tell
sending me pictures all the time. She's redoing her house, right? And I get a picture saying, "Hey, what do you think of this?" Right? I had GPT, right? Change the color of the house and add this new light in here for me. And it's there's the sort of fun things, but there's a million different things that it can do. Really capable.
Look at what you did to your mom. Now she's like
Yeah,
running wild, right?
that's right. Yeah.
How funny. Well, tell us more about Truffle and kind of what you learned. You mentioned having a few startup scars. I'm sure there might be some listeners kind of going on that journey or thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm this is sort of my third startup, I guess, that I've been a part of, right? So there's a few of them over the years, right? And maybe I'll share a few scars and a few sort of learnings that we've taken away
Mhm.
this time around that have made our lives a little easier at the same time. But let me just start with Truffle. So Truffle's a candidate screening platform. And what Truffle does is it allows recruiters or recruiting teams or even sort of solo founders to design a recruiting process, right, which could be taking resumes, asynchronous interviews, or assessments, any combination of those, to help provide some more signal on the candidates that you're interviewing, before you're even really speaking with someone, which is to say, you've got a choice of 100 candidates. Which ones should you spend the most time with? The judgment is always up to the individual. We're just using AI to power some of those insights. And it's always grounded in the specific company and role, right? So it's always matching to something very specific. So we think this is giving, people who don't maybe have a giant recruiting team or are inundated with GPT generated resumes today, or ones from Easy Apply on LinkedIn where you're getting just, a ton of people who are, sort of barely qualified. It gives them new tools to help gain back some of that time and help them make better decisions. That's Truffle.
Mhm.
And maybe I'll talk, just a couple of learning opportunities. So for us, one of the things we did really well, I think, in sort of starting Truffle this time around, and that was a learning from the last organization that I ran, was we didn't really have a great operating system for the organization from day one previously. But here, right, we were very intentional from the minute that we sort of said, hey, we think we have something here and this is a real business, to define our, sort of what was our culture and our values, right, as we looked to, engage and work with, other people outside of the founding team. And then also things like our business rhythms. What does that look like? How often are we meeting and how do we make decisions? And that is such a big unlock for a small business, right? Is to define those really early. So I think that's a, sort of a key metric. It was a learning from previous and then a change this time around that really helped. Maybe from an AI perspective, I'll talk about that for a minute. I think at the very beginning, we were thinking about how could we use AI in our product, but I don't know whether we did the best possible job of using the tools ourselves. Of course, we were using GPT and Claude and some of the other models as a sort of sounding board and helping to refine some of the things that we were doing. But I would say that looks very different today, right? Where we have been sort of totally pilled on AI, right? And we're all using Claude Code in really incredible ways that have helped to, unlock the team, right? We're a pretty small team, but I think we're probably punching 10 times above our weight today because we are truly leveraging AI, not just in the product, but in, sort of the full gamut of the business.
No, I really appreciate those tips. So how is Truffle? Kind of give me a scenario of how that's working today in terms of maybe if you can provide right time
Yeah.
savings. I just don't know. I mean, I didn't even know about the LinkedIn Easy app, but yeah, that makes it sense because if it's one super easy to do, then person's going to qualify that may or may not be fully qualified, one, and two, you are getting those AI written resumes that may be fully AI and not vetted with human in the loop kind of things. So yeah, there's more to go through. So give me a case scenario. How's it working today? And maybe number of hours or reduce
Yes.
or save, that kind of thing.
That's right. So the way that the sort of the first thing that we did at Truffle was to say, what's one of the biggest problems that recruiters have today? And one of the sort of big bottlenecks that we identified in the process was around just like phone screens, right? If you can imagine, you've got to sift through resumes and then you've got to do phone screens. And phone screens, I think, is a really great example because you can put some concrete numbers on it. So if you imagine you have a role and you have 100 applicants and you decide that you're going to screen 20 of those applicants. That means you've got to schedule time with those 20 applicants. So I got to, get on calendars and I got to go back and forth and I got to get time, right? And then I got to pick up the phone and I got to get on a, 15, but it's probably more like a 30-minute conversation by the time you go through pleasantries and, get some
Mhm.
information from these folks. So that probably takes a week worth of your time, right? Just to do these phone screens for one application. And in the end of it, what do you get out of it, right? Is you're probably making some gut decisions on who you liked best, right? Hopefully as a sort of, well-trained recruiter, you are also bringing some rubrics or scorecards to those and you're asking some consistent questions. But I think what we've learned is that's, sort of it happens sometimes and it doesn't other times. And so then you're sort of comparing apples to oranges, right? At the end when you're trying to figure out which candidate to move forward. So with Truffle, we said, hey, look, we think there's a better way to do this, which is a one-way video interview, right? Where you can actually set up a list of the questions, right? You build some scoring rubrics for those questions and you send a link out to the candidates who can complete it on their own time. So you're not tied to setting up sort of those first conversations. They take the one-way video interview and it's not like creepy AI here, right? It is just, they're getting asked a question. And that's been really successful. So we have some companies who are using this sort of one-way video interview assessment. And what that gives you is you can see how they communicate. We do rank and score those candidates, right? Based on the job description and those particular questions. And then you're getting a really fair sort of consistent view across all of the candidates as well. So in the end, what you can do is then you have maybe your top 5 and then you can go, right? And you can reach out to them and schedule that first interview. As we've compressed the time that it's taken to get from getting applications in your inbox to making sort of confident decisions on where you should spend more of your time. And there's one other sort of really cool feature in here, which I'll share, which is one of the things we do with AI is we take a look across that whole transcript, right? So let's say there's 5 questions, maybe there's 10 minutes worth of video, and we pull out sort of the 3 top moments from that interview, and we build it into a little candidate short, right? So when you're going through candidates, you can sort of watch these candidate shorts to get the top moments from each one. And so maybe, for your best candidate, you're watching that candidate short and you're diving in and you're watching a few of the questions. It might take you a total of 10 minutes, but you've got really good signal there. For those other candidates, you're watching the candidate short and you're sort of moving on. And so for those ones who aren't a good fit, you're spending 30 seconds rather than 30 minutes on those candidates.
Oh my God. I am so blown away. This is so awesome. So one thing I want to recap and make sure I got this straight. So I love the fact that I don't have to get on the phone, schedule. I mean, right then and there, that saves you a week's time.
Yep.
So what happens, and it's kind of easier for the candidate to sometimes people get intimidated, but now some people may have a problem with it, but I like that they can just have that one way conversation. So it's an algorithm behind the scenes, an AI algorithm that's ranking the questions and other parameters, and it puts it like in a summary. So said HR person can review that and determine, okay, let's narrow down that 100 to the 20 that we want to take to the next level, so to speak. So, I mean, that is just mind blowing, but it's the algorithm that's ranking those questions and capturing those top moments behind the
Yeah.
scenes, right? Did I capture that correctly?
That's exactly right. So, you're giving the candidate the opportunity to do it on their own time, and we're sort of scoring and ranking those candidates. And I will say
Mm,
that it's pretty good, right? Like this is where AI sort of shines, is that with sort of good algorithm on the back end that we've put
mm,
together, it can
okay.
really recognize, and it is taking cues from the job description, from a sort of intake that the hiring manager does to say, here's what I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking for people who have great communication, or who are builders, right? Rather than just doers. Or these are the things that I don't want, right? We can sort of pick up on those, and that helps in the ranking and matching.
What do you say to the person? I can hear this. There's a person, a friend of mine I'm good friends with on LinkedIn, and he's a recruiter, and he is very big on, AI, and not speaking negatively against it necessarily,
Yeah.
but he's skeptical. So what do you say to the skeptics out there that say, yeah, but this is going to take away some good candidates. It's just, it's people to people. That's the way it is. What do you say to someone who says something like,
Yeah, look, I totally get it, right?
yeah,
I absolutely empathize with that. But I think for us, so I think if you were to look at, sort of Truffle competitors out there in the market, they're probably saying things like, well, in fact, I know that they're saying things like, AI can help you choose those candidates. In fact, but we've taken a really different approach to this. And what we've said is we want to give recruiters new tools in their toolkit, right? Help them build the ultimate screening flow that has some AI in there. But ultimately, we're not making a judgment. We know that that's where the recruiter superpower really lies today, is being able to make that ultimate judgment. But what recruiters need today, right, given how candidates have changed, right, with AI, is they need a way to cut through all the noise that's out there and get to more signal. And that's really what Truffle does here, is it gives recruiters the signals. Your friend who may not be sort of wholly trusting AI, right? Some signal from the different tools that we provide to them in this sort of customized screening flow that help them make those decisions.
yeah. And the way I see it, and I'm no recruiter at the end of the day, but I love what you said about, I mean, there's a lot of noise and stuff out there, but it's not taking away that final interview, right? Or it's narrowing down, the most qualified so that
Yeah.
your time can be best spent in interviewing those qualified people, that face to face or what, or executive or second tier interview to really narrow it down to get to the right person. So it really is just a tool for that. And so I think if we embrace it by that way, because I also think even if you're doing a 30-minute call, going back to the old way and taking a week's worth of time, you could easily miss things in that too. So I think that will always happen. But if you can speed up the search, especially if you have a
Yeah.
position that needs to be filled. I mean, it's a win-win for everyone. At least that's how I see it. So I just
Yeah.
applaud you and your team for doing that. That's really awesome. And we'll make sure
Yeah.
and link to Truffle as well, because yeah, I'm looking at it on the website. It looks amazing. So that's awesome. So tell us, speaking of that, what kind of two-point question, where do you see trends going in AI? I mean, you're building things, you're doing this. Kind of what's on the second wave, in your opinion, of where AI is going?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So I think what we will see is there's this idea of diffusion, I think, that we'll see in AI over the next little while, right? Which is really that some roles see it today and some roles see very little AI. And I imagine that just more and more people will start to see AI creep into sort of their daily work, right? I think that's something that's happening today. And we'll continue to see that happen. And the models continue to get smarter, right? Much smarter. I don't think there's any slowing down, right? At least in the next little while, what that looks like. And so, our sort of bet here is that in the near term, what we need to do is more people will become what we call an architect, right? So we have this concept of like a talent architect, and that is really like Truffle's ultimate customer, right? If you think about that person in talent recruiting, that maybe is looking a little onto the horizon, and they're saying, I see some things changing here, right? And what I need is a way to orchestrate these things, right? And orchestration is really key in AI. And so, some roles will change over the next little while. And I think for folks, if they are looking onto the horizon, right, it's how can you become an architect in your role, right? If your role is likely to be impacted by AI, sort of seriously at some point in the future, it really gives you superpowers in that case, right? Where you can build a new screening flow, which includes AI here. And all of a sudden, it's not just processing more applications, right? I think that's the sort of standard way that a lot of people think about it, but it's how do we actually get more signal out of those applications, right? And I'm talking about Truffle specifically, but I think that this applies in a lot of different roles in, marketing, for instance, or sales, right? If those marketing architects or sales architects will be the ones who will really stand out in time by leveraging AI.
No, it's just great perspective. I appreciate that. So what's on the horizon for Truffle? I mean, and you mentioned something, so I want to go back to it. Who your target? I mean, you already talked about the pain point you're solving. Who's your target audience, and what's the next wave for Truffle?
Yeah. So, if we really think about the sort of evangelist for Truffle, it's sort of it's probably a smaller recruiting team, right? Which could be a founder, right, who's being supported by a couple of people, or somebody in operations, or sort of truly the talent at maybe sort of 3 to 5 people in the talent and HR organization, right? That's where I think folks will get the most out of Truffle today. Very simple and easy to get up and running, right? Which has always been sort of really key to us and what we're doing. If we think about the horizon, so we started sort of one-way video interviews. Next week, we're going to be launching some new assessment types. And the way that we've designed these assessments is sort of to be AI proof, right? If you think of a lot of assessments that exist today, you can sort of game them with AI, right? You sort of put them into ChatGPT, or you have it running in the background and it'll give you the answers. But these are designed to sit alongside one-way video interviews to give you a different sort of signal, right? One-way video interviews gives the ability to assess communication and some skills there, but it's either sort of like an environment fit, which is sort of more of a culture assessment, or a situational job test, which gives more sort of skills based, or a personality test. And we've designed them in such a way that, they're sort of meant to be AI proof. You can't sit with ChatGPT. You don't know what the answers should be, which gives you great signal again. So you start to partner those together, and then resume screening will come online shortly after that. And then you've got a really nice stack of sort of from the time somebody applies to the job until they've completed some assessment, which are all pretty quick to do, right? This does not take a lot of time for Truffle's AI to sort of analyze. Once we've got those results in, you've got a really nice stack to be able to determine who you should go and talk to. And then if we think about what the sort of comes next is how do we then give them better tools in that first interview, right? So can we prepare them with a guide to say, hey, here's what we know about the candidate so far. Here's what you may want to dig in on, because we don't know these things that are sort of still outstanding on your job description. And then that's where the sort of judgment from the recruiter really comes into play to partner with the hiring manager and get folks moving on to the next level. So continuing to layer in sort of more AI in what we're doing. We're constantly improving our scoring models, right, to make sure that we're delivering truly great results for our customers.
We didn't talk about this question, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think we're hearing more in the world of data security or governance, keep protecting that data. Now, I know you're not dealing with bank account information necessarily, but some might, in some cases, argue that if you're looking at a resume and it has people's address or
Yeah.
things, that might be a concern to someone on that. And so we can't talk about AI and not discuss any data security or
Yeah.
governance side of it. How are you addressing that where appropriate with Truffle?
Yeah, so this is where our selection of models and how we run them is really important, right? And so, for some, we're using sort of, for some analysis, which has no, PII data, we're using publicly available models. And for other things, we're running sort of local instances of models, right? Which allows us to keep things really contained and ensure that, we're not sharing any sort of private information. So it's something that we've taken really serious from day one, is ensuring that compliance and privacy is just baked into the way that we work.
Good. I love hearing that. That's awesome. Well, this has just been mind blowing. I am so impressed with what you guys are doing and just the time savings. And I think I hear about this a lot in AI. And I know I talk about it in my community and whatnot, but just truly the time savings that you have. I mean, you talked about your family and marathons, just doing the things that you love and embracing life moments. And if you could get 15 to 20 hours back in your week and be able to do things productive at a workplace, or just if you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur, doing that, it's such value. So I really, really applaud and thank you for what you guys are
Yeah.
doing at Truffle. But with that said, what are some final tips or closing thoughts that you would leave listeners with in the world of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that one of the biggest things for us is how we use AI internally as well as a team. And so that's really changed over the last little while. We've sort of leveled up our own skills here. And this has allowed us to save even more time to, sort of this split, I guess. You can just work more and you can get a lot more done, right? But our goal is also to figure out how we can use it to take a little bit of time back so we can sort of continue to focus on that family time and other things. And I think that's where AI internally is really, really interesting. It's a slippery slope, but I think it's also really interesting. So an example of this is, our marketing team recently built like a release flow using Claude Code, which used to take us, 2 days to go through. You've got to write help center articles and, update your change log and all of these other things as a software company that you need to do. And now it's sort of completely automated with Claude Code, right? Where, it looks at all of our help center articles. It looks at the release that we have, right, going out, and actually analyzes the code and said, okay, here's what's actually being released. And it categorizes them by, it's a feature or a customer or an internal only. It will build the help center articles, do the change log, update a product catalog. And it runs in the background and takes about 10 minutes, right? This is a real key, right? And I noticed this on your site as well, Sandy, right? Is sort of how the process flow here for AI to do something like this, right? Which is, we run it, it goes to draft, we review it, right? We release it, and that's really key. So there's still a trust but check with AI that's really important. But if you can figure out these points of leverage in your business, right, where AI can help to automate some of those tasks, it is absolute game changing. It is really, really game changing.
Appreciate what you said. One of the things that I always try to promote and do as well, because I think what I hear so often is AI overwhelm, and I get it. I kind of heard it within the lines of what you were saying too, and that is, and I always try to think about what my listeners might be thinking. It's that, okay, that sounds automation and all these things, but I'm not there. And I think with AI, it's my humble opinion, but I think with AI changing so quickly, we have to build that foundation of knowledge. And it doesn't have to take 6 years or a PhD, but I think we have to. And that's what I try to focus on, to really build that knowledge and then just build on it so that people can say, okay, I want to build an automation. Okay, well, make sure you get your, knowledge of models, your knowledge of prompt framework, getting to that one-shot prompt, all those things that you need, I think, that are so important to get to that extra level of getting to those automations and stuff. And
Yeah.
so I do think it's so important, and just start. That's what I always tell people.
Yeah.
We were all there. I mean, I will tell you this. There's not one person I interview on this podcast that says, oh my gosh, I have 20 years of experience in AI.
That's right.
Nobody does. Everybody's learning while the plane's flying. I mean, that's really where
Yeah.
we're at. So I encourage people to begin and do great things like you're doing that are really impactful to people's lives in so many ways with the great work you're doing at Truffle. So, Sean, I just want to say thank you. I mean, there are so many words of wisdom in this podcast that you've provided, and I really appreciate your time and sharing that with us. And good luck on the next wave of Truffle. And as I said, we'll make sure and link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It was a great conversation. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed having Sean on the show. What a cool tool Truffle is. Make sure and check out Sean's website to learn more about Truffle and all the great things he is doing. In our next episode, it is me and the mic talking all about AI enablement. I recently had a debate with someone about the fear of losing their job and the anger and frustration that comes with it. Yes, some jobs will be replaced with AI. You, however, won't be replaced unless you are letting those who understand and are using AI effectively have the upper hand. Don't let that be you. Let's talk about it, and more importantly, let's do something about it. Until next time, take action, execute, and let's run the play.